week's episode of the Goodrum Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, okay, so I'm hoping that this week's episode of the show is highly anticipated by a number of you guys. It's certainly going to be, I think, one of the oldest in combined ages of samples that I have episodes of the show that I've ever done. I can't think of too many others that have done this kind of level of aged whiskies. And originally I had 8 samples which I thought would work really nicely. It was quite a struggle to figure out which ones to leave out. So as you can see, I've got 7. So I'm not going to say too much more and just get on with introducing today's lineup. Right, okay, so I'm not doing sort of young-ish to old necessarily today. It's more sort of stylistically set out, so hopefully I've kind of got them in the right order, but we shall obviously see. We're going to kick off with a 26-year-old Bunnah. Not very many times I can say I'm kicking off an episode with a 26-year-old. So this was distilled in October of 1989, bottled in November of 2015. It's a Hunter Liang old malt cask bottling, so relatively new bottling. It was aged in a refill bourbon hoggy, and the code number is HL12142. Second bottling we'll be looking at is a Douglas Liang Director's Cut Bunnahabhain, distilled in February of 1979 and bottled in June of 2014. Don't know what the code is. I mean, I know the internal code, but I don't know what the cask reference DL is, and it was aged in bourbon, so again I'm guessing refill, probably hoggy or possibly a barrel, I don't know. Bottled at 45.2. It's a bit of a shame that Douglas Liang seemed to have sort of dropped the Director's Cut range, because they were always really nice. I mean, I'm guessing the sort of the casks they would have used for that they're now using for the extra old particular range that they do, but nevertheless it's always sad to see something go. But anyway, third bottling we'll be looking at is an old Douglas Liang old malt cask. This is a 25-year-old bottle of 50%. Distilled in November of 1987, bottled in February of 2013. One refill bourbon hogshead, DL9516. Now, as I didn't find the sample for the Morrison Mackay Strictly Limited bottling the last week, I thought I need to put in one of their bottlings this week, and so this is a celebration of the cask bottling of Bunnahabhain. It's 29 years old, was distilled in 1988 and bottled in March of 2018. As you can see, sherry, refill sherry hogshead, number 3928. Then we're going to move on to another sherried Bunnah. This is a Rattray bottling. This is a 31-year-old, bottled at 49.4, was distilled in 1976 and bottled way back in 2008. It was a refill sherry cask. Don't know whether it was a butt or a hoggy, but the number is 6223. And now, 2 rather special ones. These are both from the Jim McEwen's Celtic Heartland range. This is a 33-year-old Bunnah. It was bottled at 46.7, distilled in 1976, bottled in 2010, would you believe? It was aged in initially in Fino sherry and finished in ex-Yquem casks. And last but not least, another bottling in the Celtic Heartlands series. This was distilled in 1968, 1 year after I was born, and bottled in 2010, so making it 41 years old. Bottled at 40.7% from a single refill sherry cask. Now, I don't get samples of these days, I can tell you. I mean, I do get some oldish samples, but certainly don't get samples of that kind of level. And it was interesting. So I thought, I wonder how much it was originally retailing for. So I had a look back at an old price list of mine from 2010, and it was on the shelf at about £250, I believe, which was quite expensive, you know, 9 years ago. I mean, technically you could say it's still expensive now, but I mean, you know, 41-year-old whisky of any sort is now, well, probably paying closer to £500 on the shelf. And this particular one, if you actually wanted to buy it now, you would have to part with somewhere in the region of 1,300 quid. Anyway, so there you go. That's today's lineup. I think this is going to be a really interesting tasting, and yeah, let's kick off with a bit of 26-year-old. Right, okay, so this is the 26-year-old Hunter Liang Old Malt Cask bottling. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Wonderfully mature, dusty American oak, sweet barley, summer fruits, mature summer fruits, just a subtle vanilla note, wonderfully soft spices. I mean, this just shows how gorgeous Bunnahabhain in American oak can be. Give it some time and those wonderful summer fruits become quite mature. I mean, it's got a little bit of salt, it's got that fragrant, aromatic kind of character that I think is typical of Bunnahabhain in American oak. And it is just a sublimely good nose. I mean, that is gorgeous. A little bit of a herbal note coming through now. But, you know, it is just so balanced. You know, no particular aroma is standing out. It is just really harmonious and absolutely gorgeous. See what the pal's like. Quite sweet, lots of sweet apricot, a little bit of lime conserve, salt, sweet barley, a little bit of oak as well. Again, wonderfully aromatic, wonderfully fruity. It is just been, in my opinion, bottled at the right time. Again, the palate is just wonderfully harmonious. It has that, again, there's no sort of one particular flavour kind of overriding the other. It is just so harmonious, wonderfully long. Again, the sort of saltiness kind of comes back on the finish, and there's a little floral honey kind of note as well, just on the aftertaste. I mean, it's just gentle, delicate, but it's got some real depth to it, and oh, that's a lovely start. Right, okay, so let's move on to the Director's Cut 35-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Wonderfully fragrant. Again, it kind of takes the sort of fruity, fragrant character of the old malt cask bottling and just turns it up a couple of notches. There's some dried fruit, there's some grainy and dusty American oak, oh, lovely mature honey, beeswax, apricot, apple skin, a little bit of tobacco leaf, some dense spice but soft, lovely malty core to it as well. I mean, this is just unbelievably good. I mean, it's got so much depth to it. And now the oak is starting to become a little bit more buttery, and that's coming out, and it's kind of, you know, the aromas are kind of waxing and waning. There's a still retaining a little bit of coastal note as well, a little bit of salt. But again, it is just fabulously harmonious, and the intensity is just absolutely gorgeous. See what the pal's like. starts off quite lemony, salty, gentle apricots, touch of baked apple, and then in comes the oak, a little bit of vanilla, a bit of dusty American oak, some spice, touch of malt. Then you start to get the oxidised dried fruits on the mid palate, with a bit of malt as well. Lovely length, touch of marzipan, vanilla, salt coming back, that lemony note kind of coming back. So that lovely sort of lemony note is just giving it such a wonderful freshness. Again, really harmonious, really balanced, and again showing how beautiful the spirit that Bunnahabhain produces can be. It doesn't need to be swamped with sherry, and it doesn't need to necessarily be aged for 35 years in an American oak cask. I think we saw from last week's episode of the show that, you know, Bunnahabhain just is a lovely, light, elegant, fruity, summer fruits kind of spirit, and you know, to me that just epitomises how damn good Bunnahabhain actually is. Right, okay, so we're going backwards a few years now. So this is the Douglas Liang Old Malt Cask 25-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Now this is showing a slightly different side to the Bunnahabhain character. It's darker, it's maltier, there's more sort of subtle balsamic vinegar notes. It's got earth, it's got leather, tobacco. It's got less of that sort of glorious summer fruit, and we're getting a little bit more aged notes. Slightly herbal. Again, quite malty, dense, but like I said, this is more about the oxidation character and the maturation character than it is necessarily about the wonderful fruitiness of the spirit. So we're in a sort of slightly different territory here with this particular bottling. But either way, I mean, it is still absolutely gorgeous. I mean, you know, you would not be disappointed to taste this if you had the opportunity, that is. Let's see what the bar's like. Again, more woody, darker, treacle, dark wood spices, malt, balsamic notes, earth, touch of smoke as well, just drifting in. Lovely spicy mid palate and finish. Again, got that wonderful aged fruit character, and it is considerably different to the previous two, in the fact that you're not getting so much of the overt sort of fruit character of the spirit. This is more about the oxidation, the maturation, the interplay between the spirit, the wood, and the air, and it's just sort of brought out the sort of the darker side of Bunnahabhain, if you like. You know, it's yeah, maybe gone over to the dark side a bit, and it's just really different and really intriguing. And this is the wonderful thing about single cask bottlings, is that, you know, just because a distillery produces a specific style of whiskey doesn't necessarily mean that every cask is going to be absolutely identical. They're all individual, they're all mature in different ways, and sometimes, you know, they go a bit like this, they go a bit quirky, a bit, you know, against the grain of the distillery character. And yes, you can argue that this is why the distilleries don't tend to use the more quirkier casks. And yes, you could argue that, you know, if you're buying one that's bottled by an independent, it may well not necessarily be, you know, a textbook version of that particular distillery, but it shows you something different, something that, you know, you necessarily wouldn't have normally come across in a distillery bottling. And to me, that is one of the quirks, and one of the wonderful quirks about individual single cask bottlings. You never quite know exactly what you're going to get, which is always good fun when you're tasting them. So, but yeah, again, you know, an absolutely superb malt. Quality wise, spot on. Right, okay, so now we're going to move away from the American oak-aged Bunnahs into the more sherried ones. Let's see what the celebration of the cask bottling gives us on the nose. Aromatic refill sherry, dark honey, a little bit of dried fruit, raisins, prune. There is a slight barley note happening, a little bit of lighter honey, but it's certainly got those sort of, it's a classic sherry cask Bunnah at the end of the day. Touch of cinnamon, some nutmeg. I mean, you know, this is the sort of, I mean, this is a beautiful sherry cask, it has to be said, and there's just an inkling of the distillery character if you sort of like really look for it. So it's not a sort of a total sherry monster. There's a little bit of coastal notes, there's a little bit of milk chocolate. I mean, that is a fabulous sherry cask. I mean, you know, absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. Lovely maturity, but still retains that sort of slightly coastal freshness. It's not sort of too old and too woody, shall we say. See what the palt's like. Lush, soft, velvety. It sort of caresses the tongue in. Light sherried notes. There's a little bit of prune, a little bit of raisin, but I'm also getting barley, I'm getting honey, I'm getting a little bit of coastal notes. There's a touch of chocolate. A little woody on the finish, but then that it is at its natural cask strength. There's a little bit of grippiness, but again, the sort of like the weight of fruit and sherry notes does really balance it quite nicely, and it's quite a nice kind of grippy finish. It's not sort of a bit flabby, a bit it's got some real intensity to it and a lovely spiciness. Again, we're moving away from sort of distillery character and into cask character, should we say, but you know, I'm still getting some of the distillery character, getting a little bit of the sort of like the salt, the apricot, but the length is incredible. I mean, I'm still tasting it. I mean, it's lingering and it's lingering. I mean, you know, that was a stunning sherry cask, it has to be said. I don't say that too often, do I? Okay, so let's move on to the Dear Rattray refill sherry 31-year-old. Let's see what the nose gives us on this then, shall we? Again, light on the sherry, a lot more coastal character. Rich coffee, sort of almost kind of French coffee, mature honey, touch of menthol, touch of herbal notes, a little bit of kind of almost kind of grain spirit like dried fruit, so lighter dried fruits. We're at the sort of more sultanery sort of dried apricot end of the spectrum. A little bit of vanilla, a little bit of tea leaf. Again, you know, an absolutely fabulous sherry cask, it has to be said. Little less of the distillery character, it has to be said, on this. So this is kind of, and it's kind of got the polished sherry of the distillery bottled Bunnahabhain, but there's a little bit of an edge to it as well, which is really nice. I mean, again, you know, you can't fault this for a lovely mature sherried whiskey. It sort of ticks all of those boxes. Blemish free, no sulphur. See what the palt's like. Oh, get a real menthol hit on the finish. Mint, menthol, a little bit of iodine as well. Almost kind of like that grippy American Bourbony oak, although this is a refill sherry cask. It's got that real intense Bourbony-esque kind of tannin finish. But again, the sherry is relatively light. We're at the sort of more, like I said, the sultanery kind of dried apricot end, as opposed to the darker raisinated fruit end of the sherry spectrum. And it just continues that wonderful coastal freshness. There's a little bit of citrus as well. It has a wonderful lift to it. The alcohol is just absolutely spot on. It's kind of, you know, stopping it becoming sort of overly sweet and overly flabby. There's a little bit of butteriness, a little bit of tobacco leaf, earth, loam, touch of smoke, just a thin wisp right in the sort of end of the mid palate, beginning of the finish. Again, you know, an absolutely fabulous sherry cask. Not quite got the distillery character element of, say, the Carn bottling, but even so, I mean, the complexity on that, oh, damn good. Right, okay, so let's move on to the first of the two Celtic Heartlands bottlings. Now, I think these two were in, I think it was the second release. I remember the very first release came in a slightly different box, in a sort of a lacquered box, and it had things like, there was I think it was a 68 Macallan, there's a 67 Highland Park, which is in my collection, and it is kind of earmarked for when I retire, but that's no silly money, and I'm just sort of wondering, you know, dare I drink that when I retire? Maybe it'll be a kind of, yeah, why the hell not? Let's drink. I mean, what will it be by the time I retire? You know, if I ever get the opportunity to retire, if our government will have us slaving till we're dead, really, before we can draw our pensions. But you know, anyway, that's by the by. Let's see what the nose gives us on this. Ooh. Light leafy sherry. It's not stonking Oloroso sherry. It's got that lovely lightness of touch to it. Quite coastal. Plenty of late harvested honey notes. The Akem is kind of adding that sort of dense, slightly dark honey. Touch of coffee, sweet spices. But all the while, that sort of coastal note is just adding balance. I mean, these were all casks that were selected by Jim McEwen, and you know, I remember when I was at working up at the distillery back in 2003, to cut a long story short, eventually I got the opportunity to taste some stuff in the warehouse, and the first cask that Jim went to and said, "You've got to taste this," was the 79 Lagavulin, which was bottled in the Mission Series. I think it was Mission Series 2, I think, which was absolutely stunning. But yeah, it's a little bit of toasted toffee, but again, the coastal character. I mean, this is what, 33 years old, and that coastal character is still absolutely there. I mean, I'm guessing that this spent probably a large portion of its time in Bunnahabhain before probably being shipped to Bruichladdich. So I mean, you know, 33 years in a coastal environment, and oh, you can tell. I mean, that is just stunning, absolutely stunning. Balanced, fragrant, lovely honeyed notes kind of wafting through. A little bit of wood smoke as well. Touch of vanilla kind of coming through now. Green nuts. I mean, oh, complexity is not the word for it. It is stunning. Let's see what the palate's like. Crystallised violets and crystallised orange on the finish, a little bit of smoke. It's got that wonderful unctuous, oily, honeyed, like treacle, mouth coating character. Again, the sweetness is very restrained. It's got a real coastal intensity which balances up that late harvested honey kind of character. Touch of dried grape. Oh, it's just so laid back. It's decadent, but it's just that coastal character. It's just making everything seem so fresh and lively, and the balance is sublime. I mean, you know, you've got this wonderful, dense, rich, honey mouth coating character with the salt piercing through it. There's some spices, some coffee. There's a touch of licorice. And that is just absolutely to die for. I mean, that is stunning. I mean, all right, you can argue that there's not any kind of distillery character in so far of the sort of like the wonderful fragrant fruit and what have you. Again, this is more about the cask and the maturation, but it is stunning, and the coastal character is just sort of, you know, ooh, you know, I mean, stunning, stunning, stunning. What more can I say? Right, and finally we're on to the 41-year-old Celtic Heartlands bottling. So refill sherry. Let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Oh, that is just wonderfully mature. Again, lovely coastalness that comes through. There's a bit of praline, tobacco, herbal honey, leafy sherry, malt, more toffee, bruised apple, and again, not quite as coastal as the previous bottling, but there's enough kind of coastal character there. Really sort of intense, really fleshy, full, aromatic, delicate but robust at the same time. Oh, stunningly mature, but again that coastal saltiness is just, you know, balancing it all up and giving it a lovely lively kind of edge to it. A little bit of spice now, a little bit of clove oil, sandalwood, touch more honey. I mean, that is, I mean, the sherry is you know, I mean, I think the thing with oak character, generally speaking, you'll get a spike. You get sort of, initially you get a lot of oak character being imparted into the spirit, and it kind of goes like that, and then it gets to a point where it starts to sort of dip back down again, and the sherry notes or the oak notes tend to sort of, you know, become lessened over time. And this is just sublime. It's just absolutely sublime. Yeah, I am even getting a little bit of distillery character. Again, it's something, you know, you've got to look for it, I suppose, but there's a touch of barley, a touch of almost kind of a very mature summer fruit, touch of berry possibly, a little bit of some more apricot, just honey, and I mean, this is a sort of malt you just keep sticking your nose into, and you just keep getting more and more and more. I mean, unbelievable. I mean, as they say, they don't make them like they used to, do they? I mean, you know, absolutely stunning. This is a sort of whiskey that, yeah, I'd quite happily drink all day, yeah, if I had a bottomless pit of cash, but unfortunately, I don't. Let's see what the pal's like. Delicate, elegant, really laid back, light honey, touch of herbal sherry, bit of toasty oak, but again, it's all very subtle. There's baked apples, there's cinnamon, slight violet note as well. Quite chewy, malty, quite full. Again, really laid back, really elegant, sort of just oozes class. And again, that sort of coastal character is just ever present. Like I said, not quite as intense as in the previous bottling, but it just provides that sort of balance, that sort of saltiness, which, you know, adds a drying element to sort of just counterbalance the sweetness of the sherry cask, and it does so superbly. Finish, I mean, sort of a lovely sort of light chocolate and a little bit of tannin and a little bit of licorice-ish, tobacco leaf again, dark honey, I mean, malt. I mean, it's one of, not quite a whiskey that defies, you know, right, you know, defies sort of an explanation, but it is one of those sort of whiskies that you can just keep picking out individual flavours, and at the end of the day, it is just a gorgeous mouthful of whiskey. I mean, oh, what a finish. Yeah, stunning. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show up. Right, well, firstly, obviously, a big thank you for you guys watching it. I hope you enjoyed this rather impressive episode. A big thank you to all the independent bottling companies that have sent me these samples over the years and continue to do so. As much as I like to do reviews that you know, you guys kind of suggest, obviously there are certain independent bottling companies that I don't have any dealings with, and I'm not likely to ever come across their stuff unless they enter them into competitions, or I just get a bit lucky. So you will see in these episodes of the show the regulars, shall we say, and that's because they kindly send me samples. So apologies if I haven't managed to dig out anything yeah, that you guys were hoping to see, but hopefully you know, these are entertaining enough. And the 26-year-old Hunter Lang OMC bottling was just a beautiful example of how gorgeous the spirit that comes off the stills at Bunnahabhain actually is. Wonderful fruity, lovely maturity, just absolutely divine. The Douglas Liang Director's Cut, well, it just kind of took that divine character and really turned it up several notches. I mean, it was sublime. I mean, I remember stocking that. I can't remember how much it was, but it wasn't particularly cheap. But, you know, damn good. Absolutely gorgeous. The Douglas Liang OMC bottling of 25-year-old. Now, I mean, again, interesting from a technical standpoint how it was completely different to the other two bottlings, how it showed a darker, more maltier character. Yes, it was less about the intrinsic character of the spirit and a little bit more about the wood and the maturation, but even so, you know, an absolutely stunning bottling, it has to be said. The Carn sherry cask, again, wonderful sherry cask, mature, not OTT sherry. I mean, it certainly looked dark, and you would have thought, oh, they could have probably put that in that black gold finish, but no, it's not. First fill Oloroso, refill sherry, and yes, can pick out a little bit of distillery character, and just fabulously balanced. A lovely old sherry whiskey. So, and the AD Rattray, or the Dear Rattray bottling, again, you know, another fabulous sherry cask, it has to be said. Little less of the distillery character and a little bit more of the sherry, but again, you know, just don't bottle them like that anymore, as far as I can see. I mean, that was just pretty damn good. And then on to the 33-year-old Celtic Heartlands. Well, oh, I mean, absolutely stunning. I mean, again, lovely balance of cask types, you know. And I've always liked Yquem finishes or Sauternes finishes, because you get that lovely kind of grapey, honeyed, late harvested honey kind of character, and it's not too intrusive. It's not quite like finishing in, say, sort of port or something like that, which tends to be a little bit more overt, shall we say, but not always, but kind of coming back to that bottling, I mean, you know, that was stunning, and what made it was the coastal character. I mean, again, yes, you could argue not a huge amount of distillery character, more about the wood and the coastal, its environment, shall we say, but even so, I mean, just as a standalone whiskey, absolutely stunning. And the 41-year-old, well, mind-blowingly good. I mean, you know, one of those sort of whiskies that just has everything that you want. I mean, it had complexity, it had softness, it had character. All right, again, you could argue that at 41 years old there was not exactly a huge amount of distillery character, and again it was more about the wood and the oxidation, but oh, sometimes, you know, you just have to just say, damn, that was a damn fine whiskey, and in that case it certainly was. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show. Some seriously old Bunnah, as they say. Don't know if I'll be ever doing another tasting quite of this kind of calibre, or age, shall we say. I haven't actually totted the ages up to sort of see what it all added out to, but I'm pretty certain that this was probably one of the oldest episodes of the show that I've ever done, and damn, it was good fun. So anyway, until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed it. All I have to say is good gramming and good afternoon.